Hello, ladies and gentlemen from around the world. Welcome to another exciting episode of the Global Talkative Series with your host, Lanre Ajayi. On this show, we've been blessed to have amazing and wonderful guests from around the world who are taking time out of their busy schedule to be our guest on this show. And today is not an exception. In fact, today we have an amazing guest in the house, a special person to Calgary, to Canada, and to the world. I'm talking about no other person than the mayor of the city of Calgary. And like we do it on this show, I'm going to read the profile of our guest to you so that you can have an understanding of who our guest is. And then we'll go into the question and answer segment. So I will be going right away into the question to the reading the profile of our guest.
Great.
Nahid Nenshi was sworn in as Calgary 36th mayor on October 25th, 2010, and was re-elected in 2013 and 2017. Prior to being elected mayor, Mayor Nenshi was with McKinsey and Company, later forming his own business to help public, private, and non-profit organizations grow. He designed policy for government of Alberta, helped create a Canadian strategy for the Gap, Banana Republic, and Old Navy, and worked with the United Nations to determine how business can help the poorest people on the planet. He then entered academia, where he was Canada's first tenured professor in the field of non-profit management at Montreal University of BSET School of Business. For his work, Mayor Nenshi was named a Young Global Leader of the World Economic Forum and was awarded the President's Award from the Canadian Institute of Planners and received the Humanitarian Award from the Canadian Psychological Association for his contributions to community mental health. In 2013, after his stewardship of the community during devastating flooding, Maclean's magazine called him the second most influential person in Canada after the Prime Minister. He was also awarded the 2014 World Mayor Prize by the UK-based City Mayors Foundation as the best mayor in the world. In 2014, it was also honored by Elder Pitts standing alone with the Blackfoot name Apaistu PC. Sorry
There's
for
no
the
way you can pronounce it like that. It's too hard.
yeah,
Even for Nigerian, it's too hard. Oregonian, it's too hard.
yeah, which means clan leader or he moves camp and others followed. In 2016, Elder Bruce Starlight of the Sutina Nation honored him with the name Letia, always ready. Menenshi holds a Bachelor of Commerce with distinction from the University of Calgary, where he was president of the Student Union and a Master in Public Policy from the John F. Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University, where he studied law, where he studied as a Kennedy Fellow. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome our guest today, Mayor Nahid Nenshi. How
Well,
are you, sir?
thanks so much, Lonry. I feel like after that wonderful introduction, we're done now. You've said everything there is to say about me, but I'm very happy to be able to be with you here. And we were having some technical difficulties up top, and I see
So,
that it's working now, and we are both on Instagram
yeah,
and here broadcasting. So that's great.
that's wonderful. So, our guest, we are reaching now from our studios, and we're coming to you live on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube with the mayor of the city of Calgary. And I just read his profile for you. So, how are you, sir?
I am super, and I'm so happy to have the opportunity to chat with you today on Global Talk Active. We're in a world at the moment where I just feel like we are surrounded by negativity.
Hmm.
I feel like we're surrounded by folks who are just not sure that the world can go back to being a place that can be better. We're
Hmm.
having very difficult conversations around issues like racism and anti racism and what that means around Black Lives Matter, around Indigenous Lives Matter. But we're doing so in the context of a public discourse and a politics that just feels really angry.
Hmm.
And so I really reach out to you and applaud you, Andre, for bringing people together in real dialogue and real conversation that helps us remember the potential of our humanity. Now, I have to tell you one thing, though, which is this is very odd because we have two screens at the same time.
Yeah.
And I must say to you, the only thing I can see on these two screens is the fact that the picture behind me is crooked. And I just feel like I must fix it because it is driving me insane. So
Yeah.
you
Okay.
tell me
Yeah. Go ahead.
if we're getting it more straight now.
Yeah, it's better now. Oh, it's better. Oh no,
Oh, 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 oh. Did you think
almost
you would
there.
furniture moving. That's
Yeah,
not bad.
that's so bad.
Yeah, and we were in the middle of the show.
Yeah, thank you very much. So our guest
It's a little
today,
bit hectic, but we'll live with it.
okay, the topic of our discussion today is the man, the mayor, and his city. And away from all the politics, want to get to know our mayor. Want to get to know how he relaxes, what he does, the kind of food. And we're going right to the first question, which is who is the mayor when he's not in the office or functioning as the great leader of the city of Calgary?
It's hard to answer that question because I'm not sure there is a normal guy in there anymore. I'm about to have the 10th anniversary, if you can believe it, of being mayor. That's next weekend.
Wow.
And, one of the things about this job is that, and I love it, but it is that it is all consuming. When you go to this grocery store, it is also an open house on the latest changes on public transit, right? You're talking all the time. You're on all the time. But that is something that I really loved. And, in one way, I'm very lucky, though in another way, I'm unlucky for the same reason, that I don't have a family of my own. And I'm really able to commit to being able to do this work. But outside, I am a son. My 79-year-old mother lives with me.
Wow.
And we try to look after her. I have two amazing nieces who are 11 and 17. One of them is about to graduate high school and thinking about her future. And I've got a very wonderful family. I'm an African, as you may or may not know. My family is from Tanzania.
Wow.
And so each of my parents have 10 siblings. I know Canadians who have like 3 cousins, which I do not understand, because of course I have 100 of them.
Yeah.
And that's a huge part of who I am. I love the theater. And so in non-COVID times, you'll see me all the time out and about supporting the arts community in Calgary. I love movies. We've just finished the Calgary International Film Festival, and I was able to watch some films online because I'm still a little nervous about going to the movie theater. But that's one of the great things about my job is that I can take a lot of the things I love to do and really do them in a way that is supporting great people doing stuff in the community as well.
That is amazing. Now, the next question is about your childhood. How has your childhood experience influenced your journey to the current leadership position?
So let me start from before I was born.
Hmm.
When my parents were newlyweds and raising my sister, who's 4 years older, 3.5 years older than I am, they were living in a place called Arusha at the base of Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania. And then as now, Arusha is used a lot by the United Nations and other international organizations as a place for international meetings. Even the trials around the genocide in the former Yugoslavia were held there. And so my parents met some aid workers from Canada, from a country they'd never heard of before. And those workers used to get the Toronto Star, the newspaper, delivered to them in their diplomatic pouches. Wow. And for those people who are watching who are under the age of 40, a newspaper is sort of like an iPad, but printed out. Yeah. And so they used to get the Star, and Dad was always a big reader. And so he learned a lot about this country on the other side of the world. And in particular, he saw pictures of the Toronto City Hall. And he was really fascinated by this beautiful building. For those that don't know it, it's a real masterpiece of 1960s architecture. And he said, one day I'm going to go and see that City Hall.
Wow.
And there was an opportunity, and a lot of your viewers in Africa will get a kick out of this, which is some years later, he had the chance to get on a plane for the first time in his life, he and Mom, and go to his sister's wedding representing the family in London, England. And so he figured, well, since I'm going to London, I may as well go to Canada. I don't think they had Google Maps then. I don't think he had a sense of how far that was.
Yeah.
And they came to Canada. They came to Toronto. He saw the City Hall. They decided that they wanted to settle here. Before they left, Mom learned that she was pregnant with me.
Wow.
But they went on the tour anyway. So I always say I was born in Canada, but made in Africa. And so we started a life in Canada, and a life of, sacrifice, a life that was certainly much more difficult than the life they left behind in Africa,
mm,
but also a life that was really characterized by service. You know, in
yeah,
South Asian languages, we have the word seva, and
mm,
it means service. And that was really what drove them. You know, they were new to the country, they were figuring their way out around. There were only very few South Asian families in Toronto at the time, even fewer Somali Muslim families. And then only a year later, the Asians were expelled from Uganda. And suddenly, this little group of people who barely knew how to get on in this country themselves found themselves looking after thousands of refugees, and helping them get their way in the country. And so that really is kind of the definitional piece of how I was raised. You know, when I was almost 2 years old, we moved from Toronto to Calgary. I always say that I did all my research and wrote my briefing book and convinced my parents that the future was in the West. And we packed up our belongings in a
wow,
1974 Dodge Dart and drove across the country, and settled here in Calgary, where I went to school, where I did my undergraduate degree, always with that sense of there's something more important, that there's always this bit of service that needs to be done.
mm,
After I finished my undergraduate degree, I moved away. I went to Toronto. I did graduate work in the United States, but I always wanted to come back to Calgary. And so I
mm,
got the chance to do that just before 9/11 in 2001. And the only thing I knew is that I wanted to embark on a career and a life that was more about community service, because I had worked sort of in this very Bay Street, Wall Street job for quite some time, and I loved it, but I never felt like I was really making a difference in the community.
mm,
And so when I came back to Calgary, the only thing I knew is that I wanted to have a career that was more about the community. I ended up becoming an academic at Mount Royal University, and teaching there. But 9 years after I came back, I found myself running for mayor.
wow,
And so I certainly think I found a career that is more about community service. And
exactly.
ultimately, it's kind of one thread of where I come from to where I ended up.
That is amazing. Thank you very much. You said something. I read it somewhere that your dad saw the picture of the city hall in Toronto, and not only that, he saw that he actually saw you sworn in
Yeah.
one city hall
Yeah.
in the city
So
of Calgary.
he came to Canada because he wanted to see one city hall. And then 38 years later, just before he passed away, he had the opportunity to see his son sworn in as mayor in a different city hall, many thousands of kilometers away. And I love that story because not because it's, self-aggrandizing about me. It may sound like an extraordinary story, but what's really critical about that story is that it's actually an ordinary story.
Yeah,
It may be extraordinary in its details, but it's a very Canadian story. And it
exactly.
speaks to the promise of this place, the ability for people to succeed here. And I think, especially as we're having really hard conversations right now about anti racism and what that really means, I like to use that as my
Yes.
touch point to say, regardless of how much work we have left to do in Canada, and there's a lot,
Mm,
we also can at least start in the place that says, we are here in a place that should value us and does value us, where extraordinary things are possible for ordinary people.
that is amazing. Now, talking about becoming a mayor, it's a major job. It's a life of sacrifice, dedication. Every day you're thinking about the city. They are calling you from this department, from that department. So, what has been the most difficult decision you had to take as a mayor of Calgary,
Oh my
and how
gosh,
did you handle
do
it?
you mean today? It happens every day, I'll tell you one funny thing, which is that in the city of Calgary has been around for 136 years. And in the 136 years the city has been here, we have had to declare a state of emergency exactly twice.
Mm,
And lucky me, I got to be the mayor for both of them.
wow.
Um, in dealing with the floods in 2013 and dealing with the pandemic now. And so there's a series of tough choices here. But let's talk about the flood, maybe.
Yeah.
And, it's a great story in many ways. And I could spend another hour just telling you all the details. But I was in Toronto. I was having a day that is a typical day when I'm traveling, where I was giving about 5 or 6 different speeches. I was starting at 7 o'clock in the morning, finishing at 10 o'clock at night. And I was really excited about it because I was then going to take the weekend off because my good friend was getting married in Ontario. And I thought, well, I'm in Toronto anyway. So I'm going to go and spend the weekend at her wedding. And that morning, the water started to flow.
Wow.
And so for the first several hours, I was trying to manage the crisis from Toronto. And then when things were a little bit under control and I felt like I could be out of touch for 3 hours, I got on a flight, flew back to Calgary, landed late at night, went out to survey what was going on, and famously did not sleep for 43 hours as we were trying to manage the situation. But what was really touching, I guess, about that is I remember standing on the banks of the Bow River. For those who know Calgary, in the community of Sunnyside, just down from the Peace Bridge. And it was dark because the electricity had been cut off as a precaution. Here's an interesting thing. If a transformer, that electrical transformer that is wet, that is turned off, gets wet, it's actually not a big deal. You take a giant hair dryer, you dry it off, and you turn it back on. But if it's on when it gets wet, it will explode.
Yeah.
And it can take you months to get it back online. So we had turned off the electricity in the flood-prone areas as a precaution. So it was dark. It was, remember, the summer solstice, the longest night of the year. So there's still a little bit of sun in the sky, even at 1 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
But it was dark. And I was standing there and I could hear the river. I could kind of see it, but I could hear it. And if you are in Calgary, you know that those two rivers that meet in Calgary are the lifeblood of the city. They're in your blood. They're in your veins. You know those rivers.
Yeah.
And I had never before, and I crossed that river every day. And I had never before heard the river that loud.
Wow.
Or that angry, or that high. It was lapping the bottom of the Peace Bridge. And that moment, for the first time in this job, I was actually a little bit scared.
Wow.
I actually went, I don't know what's going to happen. And then just a few moments later, I found myself on the other side of the river in the community of Chinatown, where we had to evacuate a building of seniors. So these are seniors who live in Chinatown. They're typically very low income. They don't speak English very well. And they have been awoken in the middle of the night by a police officer pounding on the door saying, you have to go now. So you can imagine that this is a powder keg.
Yeah.
They don't know what's going on. They are confused. They might be angry. They don't know when they're coming back. And so I arrived at this scene and I just didn't know what I was going to see. And what I saw was City of Calgary volunteers who spoke Cantonese talking to the seniors. I saw police officers who had just started their shift that morning and didn't know that this was going to happen. So they were on their 19th or 20th or 21st hour of their shift. They were exhausted. And then I saw the compassion and the care and the love that they treated these seniors with.
Wow.
And at that moment, I went, you know what? We're going to be okay. Live in a community where we're going to be okay. And what followed after that was just an extraordinary burst of community spirit, of people looking after one another, and of saying, we are better together, we are stronger together. And so I had to make a lot of hard decisions at that time, a lot of tough life and death decisions, but they were made so much easier by understanding that the community was there and that we were there to look after one another and to help rebuild. And I could go on for hours with the heartwarming stories of how we rebuilt together after that. I'll tell you just one real quick one, and I'll tell you the very short version of it, which is there was a woman that I know called Bev. And, I didn't know her then. But Bev, like so many other Calgarians, just went to volunteer to help people clean out their houses and to clean up.
Mm.
And so she started by helping a friend, and then she went to the friend's neighbor, and then the neighbor's neighbor. And before she knew it, she was just working with total strangers.
Wow.
And one day she was cleaning out someone's basement, and she found a photo album, our baby, right? A
Mm.
baby album.
Yeah.
And it was completely ruined. And of all the things that she saw, that was what really hit her hard, because she said, these are people's lives.
Yeah.
They're heirlooms, and this is what they've lost, right? Because we can replace the floor, we can replace the appliances, we can replace the furniture, but how do we replace the memories?
Mm.
And so she thought to herself, what can I do? And it turns out she has a hobby. She's a quilter. She makes quilts.
Wow.
I did not know there were people who made quilts.
Mm.
And so she decided that she was going to make a quilt for a family that could be an heirloom, a good, strong quilt that would last
Yeah.
years and years, and the kids would cuddle under it, and they would make blanket forts from it. And when they left home, they would argue over who got the quilt, right?
Yeah.
And so she thought she would make a quilt for one family. Eventually, word got out of this little project. I had no idea this was going on. And then I got a phone call months later in the autumn saying, we've got this project where we made quilts for some of the displaced families. Would you mind coming and saying a few nice things to the volunteers as they go out and they go door to door in the flooded neighborhoods to deliver these quilts? And so I went. And when I got in there, I saw 1,400 quilts that had
Wow.
been made by people from all over the world and had been
Wow.
sent to Bev. And every one of those quilts had a little card in it. And it said, we know life is difficult. We know these are hard times, but understand that you live in a community that cares about you.
That is amazing.
And they went door to door and they delivered these blankets. And to me, I always think about that when I'm having a bad day.
Mm.
That is what humanity is capable of doing for one another, for people we don't even know, that we only share the aspect of being human beings with. And I think that is what really helps us be strong. And I realize I'm just going off on my own tangent on your questions. And you've got questions
That
to
is
ask.
an amazing story. Those stories reminds us that we all need each other. No man can be an island. We have to be there for each other to keep each other's hands up, especially as we're going through this pandemic. That is leading to the next question: that what is your number one coping mechanism, since the onset of COVID-19 that has kept us, housebound?
Well, like everybody, I spent a lot of time staring at computer screens, doing nonstop video conferences, occasionally getting caught up on Netflix, though not very much because I've just been incredibly busy, eating food that's probably not the healthiest. But what my coping mechanism is might be different than for a lot of people, because for me, it is remembering why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Mm.
That fundamentally we are dealing with issues of life and death for so many people. And I'm loving all these wonderful Nigerian names of the people who are saying Calgary sounds so great. It's not perfect, and we are being hit, just like everywhere in the world, by waves of populism and individualism and a lack of community feeling in our politics, in our public discourse. But ultimately, I remember that even though I have to deal with a lot of angry people and a lot of haters and a lot of unpleasant folks on social media, I just stay off social media now. I'm just done. But I remember that I am blessed because I have the opportunity to go to work or stay home and get on a computer screen every day. And in my job, I have the chance to make life better for people.
Mm.
And in the time of this pandemic, even though, I'm not the public health officer, I'm not the prime minister, I only have certain authority as the mayor, I do have the chance to help people be healthier. I do have the chance to help people keep other people healthier.
Mm.
For example, we have a mandatory mask bylaw in Calgary indoors, and it was a bit controversial to do it. And I ultimately said, you know what? If this saves one person's grandma, then why are we fighting about it?
Mm.
We need to actually do it. And so that's, believe it or not, that's been my coping mechanism. My coping mechanism has actually been reminding myself how important the work is.
Mm.
and ensuring that that's what motivates me to keep going every day. Though I will tell you, the difference is the flood started on a Thursday, and by Saturday, the waters were receding and we had the cleanup job. COVID-19 started that suddenly,
Yeah.
and here we are 8 months later with no idea of when it's going to end. And I need to say this very clearly, is all of us are exhausted. All of us have COVID fatigue. All of us are playing a little bit with the rules to see what we can get away with. That's just human. It's what we do.
Mm.
But I was talking to a mayor from, where was he from? Slovakia, I think, Bratislava, and on a video conference like this. And he had a huge poster behind his back, and it said, "Discipline is the best vaccine."
Mm.
And so I have to remind people that discipline is still important. Wearing a mask, keeping your physical distance, washing your hands, covering your cough. It sounds simple, but I feel like we've almost forgotten it
Yeah.
in this COVID fatigue. But unlike a flood or a fire where nobody can control it, it's in the hands of God. The
Mm.
pandemic is in our own hands.
Mm.
It's in our own clean hands. We
Yeah.
control, every one of us, the spread of the pandemic. And ultimately, that too comes back to this theme of we got to look after one another. And as hard as it is, and as exhausting as it is, and how strange it is to see the seasons pass in this same thing, we still got to look after one another. I will tell you a funny story, though.
Yeah.
In the end of February, I was on a business trip to India. I have never been to India before. I know I'm Indian, but I've never been to India before. And I was always laughing that I'm the first person in the world to travel to India for the first time and not go see the Taj Mahal. I was just busy. But the virus was sort of chasing us in that last week of February, first week of March. We got the first case in Alberta while I was away. They got more cases in India while I was there. And I actually thought, and then I had to be back right away because I was going to a global conference in Texas the next day. And that got canceled. It was the first international conference to get canceled. So while I was in India, I was thinking to myself, you know what? Since I don't have to be back right away, why don't I extend my trip and go see the Taj Mahal? And then they closed the Taj Mahal because the virus was.
Wow. Wow.
And I better get home. And so I got on a flight. I arrived in Calgary on a Sunday night. Monday, I was at work like normal. And I did a press conference, and people said, "Are you concerned about this virus that seems to be spreading?" And I said, "Yeah, we should probably practice better hygiene." So I made a joke. I said, "Well, I'm the mayor, so I'm going to ban handshakes
Mm.
in Calgary. You shouldn't shake hands anymore." And I've just come from India where they go namaste, so everyone should just go namaste now,
Yeah.
right? And that was Monday. Tuesday, we started closing down mass gatherings. Wednesday, the NBA suspended itself. Thursday, the NHL suspended its season. I managed to go to I love plays, I love the theater. I managed to go to the very last play that was performed in Calgary because I thought maybe I should get one in because I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
On Saturday, we declared a state of local emergency. So it was that fast. We went from maybe you should be careful about handshakes to stay in your house within the course of a week. And I don't think any of us could have believed it. And now here we are 8 months later, having gone through the end of winter, spring, summer, and now this beautiful autumn in Calgary. And we're still here. And it's amazing to me because it really talks about the resiliency of us as human beings.
Mm. That is amazing. Still on the Global Talkative series with our amazing guest, Mayor Naid Nenshi, the mayor of the city of Calgary. And I would appreciate all those who have joined us from around the world. I have Wahab Lukman from Nigeria, Uludai Adeyemo from Houston, Texas, Wilfred Buster from Calgary, Tomi Aderemi Ajayi from Calgary, Obadare Samuel from Calgary, Trevor Okafor, Sherman Hype, and all those who are watching us on Facebook, Irene Job, George, Rocky Mountain. Thank you so much. We still have some time with the mayor. If you have any question, you can send your question on Facebook or on YouTube or on Instagram, and then we'll do our best to allow the mayor to answer the question. So, what has inspired you, or what inspires you to keep on keeping on, even in the face of adversity? You have the toughest job in town. Everybody, waits for, okay, what is going to be the direction? How do we go? Where do we go? So, a lot of challenges here and there. What inspires you to keep on keeping on,
Well,
even in the face of this diversity and adversity and challenges?
and I got to tell you, these days, people are also really mean.
Mm,
Um,
yeah.
and because, everyone is at the end of their patience in the world at the moment, and people are really taking it out on one another. And ultimately, I just really do remind myself that even in taking all the abuse, I'm lucky because I'm built to take it. You
Mm,
know, if I can protect others from that,
mm,
then that is a good thing to do. And ultimately, as I said earlier, I'm really focused on this concept of seva. My life is about service, and I am so incredibly fortunate that the people of Calgary have trusted me enough to say, here's an opportunity for you to do real service.
mm,
And how lucky is that?
yeah.
How lucky is the fact that I do get to wake up every morning and not worry about how am I going to support my family today? How am I going to make things keep going? How am I going to deal with my own demons, whether it's mental illness or physical illness today? I
Mm,
get to wake up and look at my calendar and go, oh my gosh, I have so much to do. Am I even going to make it to Laundry this afternoon? Because
yeah.
I have so much I got to do. But every single one of those is an opportunity to tell a great story. Every single one of
Mm,
those is an opportunity to make life better for somebody. There's almost 15,000 employees who work for the city of Calgary,
yeah.
and every one of them abides by one simple motto. And that motto is making life better every day. And our job is simply to make people's lives better every day. And we are blessed. We are so lucky. We're so fortunate that we have the ability to do that. And
Mm,
so, in times where it gets ugly and gross and political and people are nasty, I remind myself that I'm lucky because I get to try and make life better for people. And maybe I'll do it right. Maybe I'll do it wrong. Maybe I'll screw it up. But ultimately, I have to take that responsibility incredibly seriously. That
mm,
my job is to work hard every minute of every day
mm,
to make life better for people for as long as they want me in this role. So
mm.
that really is how I manage to keep going.
Thank you very much. The next question I have for you is, given the current level of world challenges, what future of Calgary do you envisage?
It's tough. Here in Calgary right now, I would argue that we are facing four crises all at the same time. The first two are faced around the world, which is, of course, the public health crisis of COVID, keeping people alive and safe and healthy through the pandemic. The second is a mental health crisis and an addictions crisis that's been there for a while, but has really been exacerbated. It's been made worse by COVID, and that is really showing itself up in people's lack of hope, in their lack of ability to think about how to move forward, but also in a very serious addictions crisis. We've lost far more people to opioid overdose in Calgary than we have to COVID this year.
Wow.
And that was there before, but it continues to be there. And that mental health issue, I've decided that I'm going to make that the pillar of my third term as mayor. We're spending a lot of time creating new mental health strategies, but that's the second one. The third one is an economic crisis. At the beginning of COVID, people have almost forgotten about the terrible price war between Russia and Saudi Arabia for crude oil, which drove the price of oil down to single digits. And that had a huge impact on Calgary, a huge impact on people's jobs and their ability to function in the city. When you combine that with the absolute need to take action on the climate, it means that Calgary is going through a very serious economic transition. And I'm not sure that we have admitted to ourselves the depth of what that transition really is. I'm certainly not sure that our provincial government has admitted it to themselves in
Mm,
terms of what we really need to be doing here. And then finally, and importantly, that in the middle of all of this, with what happened to George Floyd acting as a trigger point, I shouldn't say trigger, but
yeah.
acting point, we're finally forcing ourselves to confront here and everywhere some very tough conversations around racism. And for Canadians, that's really hard
Yeah.
because we have been so accustomed to being so proud of ourselves for the diverse, inclusive, multicultural place that we've created. And so for Canadians, it's really hard to be able to manage understanding the reality of Black Lives Matter and Indigenous Lives Matter in the context where we're so proud of ourselves for what we've accomplished here. And so we have to be able to hold two very different thoughts in our heads at the same time. One of them is, yes, this is an inclusive and diverse place. We're super proud of that inclusivity, of that diversity, of that multiculturalism, and we should be proud of it. We should be proud of the fact that an Afro-Indian from the working class neighborhoods of Northeast Calgary can become the mayor and nobody blinks an eye. But we also need to hold at the same time the understanding that for many of our brothers and sisters and neighbors, particularly Black people, Indigenous people, and other people of color, that full potential and opportunity of our community is not real for them every day. That they actually deal with society differently. They deal with police and safety and all these other issues and have a different lived experience than others do, even than a Muslim Indian does. And so I'm hoping that we can get on this path to take us from inclusion and multiculturalism straight to anti-racism and what true anti-racism looks like. And so these are all difficult paths that we're on. They're going to require thoughtful, delicate, grown-up conversations on very difficult issues where not everyone agrees. But we have to act first as human beings to determine that if we believe in the principle that everyone who's lucky enough to share this land should have the opportunity to live the life of their top potential, to live a life of dignity and a life of opportunity. If we can start there, if we can all say we all agree with that, then we can start to address these difficult questions where we don't agree in a more thoughtful way.
Thank you very much. I have a question from France B. He said, I'm curious about the mental health strategies for the citizens of Calgary.
Great. Thanks for that question, Francis. So I happen to believe that very few cities have really got their heads around mental health, that the stigma around talking about mental health and the lack of cohesion in how we manage mental health is a real problem. So what I did starting a year and a half ago is I convened a group of citizens. The only criteria were you had to be smart and you had to care. But to come together on a community-based, I call it a community-based action plan on mental health and addiction. And I gave them a very simple charge. I said, listen, 5 years from now, I want cities around the world to say, we're going to adopt the Calgary model on mental health. The only problem is I have no idea what the Calgary model is. So you guys have to create it. And they've been busy thinking about what that looks like now based on two principles. The first principle is we have to put the person at the center of the system, not the process, not the organizations that provide assistance, the person we're trying to help. And so the system has to be built around that person. And the second is we have to think of the system as a system. Because right now, and all of us have personal stories with this. 1 in 4 of us will be touched by mental illness in our lifetimes.
Yeah.
That means that every single one of us has a member of our immediate family who is struggling with mental illness at some point in their lifetimes. Every single one of us. And yet we never, ever talk about it.
Yeah.
Especially in South Asian and African communities where there's so much stigma. But in reality, because we don't talk about it, we end up in a situation where it's harder for people to get help. And so, I have a story. We all have a story. But somebody close to me, was really struggling with addiction issues, depression, and resultant mental health issues. And I was trying to help him. And I was having a lot of trouble navigating the system. And at some point, I thought to myself, I'm the mayor. I can phone anybody. One of my best friends is a psychiatrist. I know people who work in addictions treatment, and yet I'm having trouble getting this person the help they need. How does everyday citizen navigate this?
Yeah.
How does someone who's living a street life navigate this? And so ultimately for me, that's been the big learning, is that we have to have help available for people at the moment they need it. And they have to be able to access it. And there's a bunch of broad things that go into that conversation. And I don't know the answers yet, but I know that asking the questions and starting the conversation is critical. And I just see someone's asking me about my personal mental health tips.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Thank you for that. You know what? I'm no good at it, but I'll tell you what I should be doing, which is, the simple stuff: fresh air, exercise, getting away from your job and spending time with friends and family. These things are really important. Reminding yourself of the importance of the work that you're doing, and reminding these kind of two little rules, right? Number one is don't sweat the small stuff, and it's all small stuff, because in this job, everything is a crisis today, right now, right?
Mm.
Don't sweat the small stuff, and it's all small stuff.
Mm.
I think are helpful ways of thinking about this. And also, this too shall pass. Remember
Yeah.
that you are not the only one. You are not the end all. The community will provide, and solutions will come up, even if they're not immediately ready, apparent to you. And so those are the things I try to do. Oh, yeah. And my third important rule of keeping your mental health: don't read the comments, stay off the social media.
Mm.
Man, that's very helpful.
Mm.
Which is hard for me, because I used to be very active on social media, because I loved having one-on-one conversations with citizens and really understanding their needs. But Twitter, particularly now, is just so gross. So I don't even go on it. We just make announcements on it. Someone else has my password. They deal with it. I just try to surround myself by people who are not just positive and agree with me all the time, but people who are at least thoughtful and not, angry all the time.
Thank you very much. Still talking about mental health. The question is, how does the Mayor Nenshi unwind after a busy day at work?
Well, I wish I had a great answer to that, but the real answer is, by the time I'm done, it's usually midnight and I just go to bed. But I actually really do. I really do enjoy the arts. I enjoy theater. One thing that's been tough for me is I've been trying to watch theater on TV. And it's okay, but it's not the same. And so if you have ideas of great TV shows I should be catching up on, because basically I've missed 10 years of television, I will take them now. But I do keep up on the superhero TV shows. I like those, and so I give myself a couple hours to do that. With COVID, it's been tough because I'm so extroverted and I like being with friends and family. And at the beginning of COVID, we did lots of Zoom dinners and things, and I feel like people just don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
But the one thing that's been great is in my own family, we've had a tradition for many years of Sunday night supper. But we don't do it every week, and people get busy and so on. And during COVID, we've been very good about it. And we've been saying, even if it's a Zoom thing, we get together with the family every week. And that's been great as well.
I've got someone on Instagram. I just have to read. Said, Pet Tiger, right? Said, I like to say, as someone who was born and raised in YYC, I'm proud to be Calgarian when I think of our mayor and the message he promotes. Thanks, Mayor.
Ah, that's very sweet. Thank you very much.
Now, the next question is also like the first one, the last one, rather. What is that meal or food you enjoy most and almost cannot do without?
Look at me. Obviously, it's fresh vegetables, no carbs, incredibly healthy macrobiotic food. That is a lie. The whole thing about it is wrong. So I love traditional Indian and Indo-African cooking. One of the cool things about Calgary is we have a little scene, and you kind of have to be an insider to know, but we have a little scene of Indo-African fusion restaurants where they do barbecue ribs and mishkaki, skewers of meat, and it is the most unhealthy food in the world. But it brings me back to my roots and brings me back to the stuff that that matters for me. And so that's where I'll always go back. But I love the food scene in Calgary. The great restaurants, Thai food is a favorite of mine. We've got some really wonderful Thai restaurants in Calgary. And when I was a kid, well, I shouldn't say a kid, but through high school and university in my young adult days, if I was ever, when I wasn't living in Calgary, if I was ever in town, I would never have to call my friends because they would know exactly where to find me.
Wow.
And that was on Wednesday wing night, eating the
Wow.
hottest possible wings at a particular place in Kensington that's not there anymore. I think
Whoa.
once I went away, they lost all their business.
Wow.
And so you will always, if you ever want to get me somewhere, you'll always say, let's go for wings. And it's hard for me to say no.
I know now. That's amazing. Now, I have one funny question. Said, assuming you are in the world of Tom and Jerry, where all things are possible, what would you use your powers to change or do differently?
I want to know if I'm Tom or Jerry in that world. It's a lighthearted question, but I'm going to answer it very seriously. And I think that coming back to where we started our conversation, I really think that the critical thing is to remind people of their own humanity. And if I had one power, it would be to remind everyone in the world about the value of empathy, about walking in someone else's shoes, of understanding someone else's circumstances. I don't want to be too political about the political environment in the country just south of us. But it's very clear that when you watch these presidential and vice presidential debates, what's missing is the concept of, but what about other people? It's not just about me. It's not just about my family. It needs to be about other people.
Yeah.
And so if I could change anything, I would have everyone wake up much more empathetic. Maybe I would, if it was a Tom and Jerry world, maybe I would have every single person have to live a day as someone who is the opposite of them. Men living as women. People of color living as white people living as people of color, rich people living as poor people, and vice versa. Some of those of us who are not particularly gender or sexually diverse living in the world of an LGBTQ person. And I wonder if that would help us remember the empathy of all of us, because, ultimately there's only the human race.
Yeah. That is amazing. I have a boy from Northwest. He's asking a question because the mother posted the question, said, how can I become a mayor? It's about, the boy is about 12 years old.
I love it.
Thank
you for that question. So the answer is you have to win an election. But, I'm going to say if you're 12, you're maybe grade 7, this is a great opportunity for you to experiment with getting some skills and interests, so get interested in the news and current affairs, learn to be media literate, to figure out what sources are good sources of news and information, and get really involved in your school. One of the fun things about being in junior and senior high school, nine, matter, close enough. You can start now. It's all good. So grade 3, grade 4, this is still start getting involved in things, ask lots of questions, be curious about the world around you. And as you get a little bit older, join clubs. It's a risk-free time of your life to try things out. If you think karate would be interesting, try out karate. And if you don't like it, try the next thing. And ultimately, that's what you need to be doing now, is just to be hugely intellectually curious and figuring out the kinds of things that get you excited about living in the world. And then later on, if you're interested, you can try out student politics. You can volunteer in a campaign. You are never too young to volunteer in an election campaign. There's always things to do, to hand out flyers or talk to your neighbors. You can even do that when you're 9 or 10. There's a municipal election coming up next year, so that's a great way to learn a little bit more about politics. I probably started volunteering on campaigns when I was only a little bit older than you. And there are lots of great ways to just keep being curious. And that's what's really exciting about it.
His reply is, "I will follow your instructions."
Nobody else ever does, so thank you.
I have a businesswoman here saying, "How is Calgary helping small business owners?"
This is a really important question because we small business owners in Calgary have been hit by kind of three things. Even if you're not in the energy sector, say you're in the service sector or a restaurant downtown, and there's fewer people working in the energy sector downtown, you're going to lose a lot of your lunch and your happy hour business, which is a pretty significant problem. So that's number one. Number two, of course, is what's happened with COVID. Many businesses have had to close their doors. Many of them have had to operate under health restrictions that make it difficult to make more money. And then number three is, without getting into the details of it for the international audience, in Calgary in particular, because we rely only on the property tax to raise funds for the city, some of the changes in the system, particularly from larger companies not frankly paying their taxes or going bankrupt, a lot of that has fallen onto smaller businesses who've seen their property taxes go up pretty significantly, which is a real shame. And so a lot of small businesses are feeling buffeted by a lot of big problems all at the same time. And we've tried to do what we can within our realm and scope of authority to do better. So, for example, we spent almost $300 million on tax rebates and refunds for small businesses that have been badly hit by this. There's a lot of money. This year, when COVID struck, we put in place a whole bunch of things. We deferred the payment of taxes. We waived fees and levies on different things that businesses needed in order to pivot and grow in the time of COVID. We removed the penalties on paying your taxes late, and a number of things like that. There needs to be more. We need help from the federal and provincial governments, especially on rent relief. And that's something that I have been pushing for very hard. And we need to continue to make sure that small businesses can survive this. It's a very big problem. I will tell you the funnest thing we did, which is just an example of how we're trying to think about government differently. When restaurants were allowed to reopen, they had significant capacity restraints because they had to keep people 2 meters apart. And
let me just bring back the mail.
I think I just dropped out of your Instagram here.
Yeah, I'm gonna bring you back in.
There we go.
Okay.
All right. Don't know what happened there. We're still on the studio, but we popped out of the Instagram here. Am I back? Oh, somebody says looking good. All right.
Yeah.
So I can't see myself, but I'll just keep talking. So in any case, oh, there it is. Okay. So what I was going to say was patios. So we hit a situation where the restaurants had to have lower capacity because they had to keep people 2 meters apart. And also we know that outdoors is safer than indoors. And so we very quickly turned around and made it incredibly easy for restaurants to build a new patio and to extend their patio out onto the sidewalk or onto other public space. And this summer, we were blessed with beautiful weather and we're blessed with beautiful autumn weather. And the patios for many restaurants have really been the lifesaver to keep people going. And frankly, people like me who are nervous still about all of the social interactions that we're having feel much safer on the patio. So I think I've eaten inside a restaurant twice in 8 months, but I have many patios and it's been a wonderful thing. And I'm just hopeful that we get to do that, right even through the winter. I know a lot of restaurants are winterizing their patios and trying to figure out ways to do it because you know what? There are very few days in Calgary that are so cold you can't ever be outside. And I'd love to see a little bit of a cultural shift about that too.
That is amazing. We have about 7 minutes more, and we'll be running up. We still have some questions. Now, what are your final thoughts to the global audience about creating a world where there is no prejudice and ideas on coping with the challenges of our world we're facing right now, especially with the, Black Lives Matter, COVID-19? What are your final thoughts?
Well, I think this takes us right back to where we started our conversation, right? Which is We live in a world where it can be very disheartening, where it can be very frustrating, because it just feels like so many things are moving in the wrong direction. But I also think that times like this can be moments of creativity
Mm,
and moments of creation and moments where we have the opportunity to build something better.
yeah.
Because things are so unstable right now, it's really our chance to do it. So I was just before this, I was doing a thing where there were a lot of students, university students, and one of them was saying, as a young person, I feel so discouraged about what is actually going on around us. And I said, you have to remember that your community is not something that happens to you.
Mm,
Your community is something that you build.
yeah.
And
Absolutely.
so we really have to work together to ensure that we are defining and designing the community that we want, the community that we need, that is free of prejudice. Because I got to tell you, I thought that I had dealt with a lot of racism in my life, and I thought that I knew what it was because things are just so much worse now than they were even 4 or 5 years ago for me.
Mm,
I went through 6 or 7 years with really nothing in
wow.
terms of racist activity, right? And the last 3 years or so, it's relentless. It's daily.
Mm,
And a journalist asked me recently, is it because there's more racists, or is it because the racists are more empowered? And I sort of said, that's not a relevant question.
mm,
It doesn't actually mean anything. Because as a person of color, as an indigenous person or as a black person, if you're walking down the street and you're experiencing acts of hatred, does it matter if
mm,
this is a new racist or an old racist who is now empowered to speak?
mm.
Ultimately, you're feeling less safe than you are. I have to stop right here because I have to tell you that we just see a comment from Cheryl Fago.
Yeah.
Uh, and I'm telling you that the best moment of the Calgary International Film Festival was seeing her remarkable film, John Ware Reclaimed, which is all about what we're talking about and the context of
Yeah.
what Black experience in Alberta has been. It is remarkable. It is amazing. The festival is over, Cheryl. I don't know how people can watch it, but I hope that you get a great distribution deal. And I just want to say I am grateful for you and for your voice and for your artistry. It is leadership, it matters, and I am just so happy that you joined us. Thank you. All right, back to what I was talking about. Inspired by people
Thank you,
like
Sherry.
Cheryl
Thank you,
for
Sherry.
being, um, but inspired by that kind of leadership. That's really what I'm saying is we get the chance to figure this out. But what I was trying to get at was, although the racism is worse for me, and I thought I knew, my chief of staff and my best friend for many years is Nigerian Ghanaian. And I have a sense of his Black
Mr. Chima.
experience in Calgary, Chima. And yet we had these days of hearings on racism in Calgary, and I sat there for 4 full days and listened to people's lives and their experiences. And I realized I didn't know. I thought I knew,
Mm,
but I didn't know. And in fact, Chima, the aforementioned Chima, was the very last speaker. And he felt compelled to call in. And
mm.
he said, guys, you all know me. And look, he was a partner in a national law firm, one of the first Black partners. He's a professional. He has privilege in our society. And he said, you all know me. You know that I move around in these circles and I can do whatever I want. And how many of you know that I get pulled over by the police all the time? That my license
Wow.
plate gets checked? How many of you know that my
Mm,
friends who are Black lawyers in Calgary give themselves extra time if they're walking to somewhere in downtown Calgary, just in case they have to stop and show the police their ID?
wow.
And so even in a place like this, there remains extraordinary amounts of work to do. And ultimately, it's not about politicians making big speeches or, sitting in front of a red wall talking. It is really about every single one of us using our own power, because
Mm,
ultimately the power to make change is not about amazing broadcasters and leaders in the community like Lonray. It's not about great artists like
thank you.
Cheryl. It's about all of us together, right? It's about everyday people. using our everyday hands and especially our everyday voices to create the community that we want to create. And ultimately, that's how we're going to be able to do this.
Thank you very much. We're going to be writing up on Instagram, but I want to say thank you for all those who join us on today's Global Talkative series with our guest, Mayor Knight Nenshi. Thank you so much, Mayor. We appreciate your,
Thank you.
coming on this show today. You're an amazing man, and you've been doing an amazing job for the city. I'm proud to be Calgarian, to be Canadian, and to be part of what you're doing in the city.
Uh, you're very kind, and thank you for your leadership. Now, I need to tell you all that this red wall behind me is my dining room. I'm working from home today, and
Wow.
I'm trying to set an example that we can still be working from home. But the reason I tell you that is because I made a mistake last night when I left the office, which is that I didn't bring with me the prop that I wanted to bring for today's conversation. Landry knows what it is, which is this unbelievably beautiful mask that Lanre sent to me. I don't know how to wear it, but it's called a butterfly mask.
Yeah.
And he's like, if you're going to be wearing a mask to keep other people safe, you may as well be super stylish
Yeah.
while you're doing it. And so I wanted to say thank you, because for me, that symbolizes a lot of your leadership in the
Thank you very
community.
much.
And I just want to thank you for it.
Thank you very much. I'm launching the mask next week.
Oh,
You
great.
know, it's a mask, it's a cravat, it's a bandana, it's an headscarf, it's a bikinis, ladies bikini, it's a scarf, and it's a scarf. It's a multi-purpose mask, and
I
thank you for
literally
mentioning
was
it.
like, I was wearing it and I was like, this is a mask / cravat. That's what it's
Yes,
supposed to be. And my
and also
colleague
a
in my
pocket
office was
square.
like, no, it isn't.
It's also a pocket square.
That has been
So
my thing. Now, this is a real
yeah,
pocket square I'm wearing now, but that's my
so
thing. I'm gonna get super wealthy by masks that are also pocket squares.
thank you very much, Mayor Nenshi,
Thank
for
you
coming on
so
this
much.
show.
Great to
Thank
see
you
you.
for doing an amazing job in Calgary. And thank you for all our viewers from around the world who joined today's conversation. We promise to bring you more exciting show like this. Until we see you again. Bye for now.
Bye.
Thank you very much.